It is just past 11 on the night of 25th of September, 1940, and on a stretch of open farmland above Blackdown Hill in Somerset, a fire begins to burn that was never meant to warm anybody. Wooden frames soaked in creosote crackle and spit. Strings of dim red lamps flicker in patterns designed to look, from 4,000 meters up, exactly like a factory floor working through an air raid, its machine shops lit despite the blackout, its furnaces glowing where careless workers have failed to douse them. Somewhere overhead, a Heinkel crew peers down through broken cloud, spots the telltale glow, and begins its bombing run. Bombs fall, craters open in wet turf, sheep scatter, and 7 miles away, in the real Bristol Aeroplane Company works at Filton, machinists keep building Blenheim bombers by the dim light of shielded lamps, entirely undisturbed. This is not luck. This is design. The field is a fake, built by a team of stage designers, film set painters, and engineers working for an obscure department of the Air Ministry. And over the coming months, the Luftwaffe will return to bomb it again and again, mistaking scorched grass and painted timber for one of the most important aircraft factories in Britain. Why a nation fighting for its survival chose to protect its factories not with more guns, but with paint, plywood, and deliberate deception is a story that reveals as much about British ingenuity as any Spitfire or radar station ever could. By the summer of 1940, Britain had a problem that guns alone could not solve. The Luftwaffe's bombing campaign, sharpened during the Spanish Civil War and refined over Poland and France, was turning its attention to the factories that kept the Royal Air Force flying. Aircraft production was concentrated in a small number of enormous, unmistakable sites. The Supermarine Works at Woolston building Spitfires, the Bristol Aeroplane Company at Filton, the Rolls-Royce Engine Works at Derby. Each was a sprawling target the size of a small town, impossible to hide and desperately difficult to defend. Anti-aircraft guns around Britain's cities numbered in the low thousands, spread thin across an entire island, and even a well-defended factory might see only a handful of guns protecting it against raids of 50 or 100 bombers. Fighter squadrons, exhausted by the Battle of Britain, could not guarantee interception before bombs fell, particularly at night, when British night-fighting radar was still primitive, and pilots were, in the words of one contemporary report, essentially blind. The maths was brutal. A single successful raid on Filton or Woolston could halt fighter production for weeks at the exact moment Britain needed every Spitfire and Hurricane it could build. Camouflage netting and painted roofs helped a little by daylight, but they did nothing after dark, and German bombers, forced by British air defences to attack increasingly at night, were relying less on precise navigation and more on visual cues. Fires, lights, the glow of industry. If a factory could be made to look like it was burning somewhere, it was not, or working somewhere it did not exist, then perhaps the bombs meant for it could be persuaded to fall on empty fields instead. It was an idea that sounded, to many senior officers, faintly ridiculous. It also happened to work. The man given the job of making it work was Colonel John Fisher Turner, a retired RAF officer with a background in cinema special effects, who by the autumn of 1939 had been quietly appointed to run what became known as the Air Ministry's Camouflage and Decoy Department, later Colonel Turner's department, based initially at Shepperton Studios. Turner recruited exactly the sort of people the War Office would never normally have gone near: set designers, scenic artists, and technicians from the British film industry, men used to building convincing illusions out of timber, canvas, and paint for an audience that was never meant to look too closely. Their task was to construct decoy sites, codenamed with brisk, unglamorous letters. K sites for dummy daytime airfields, complete with fake aircraft built from wood and canvas. Q sites for dummy nighttime airfields using controlled lighting. And, most relevant to the factory at Filton, QF sites, decoy factories designed to draw night bombing away from real industrial targets. The decoy at Blackdown Hill was built roughly a mile and a half from the genuine Bristol works, close enough that a navigator working from dead reckoning and a rough compass bearing might easily confuse the two, but far enough that bombs falling on the decoy caused no damage to the real thing. Its designers did not try to build a literal replica of a factory. Instead, they built an impression, a set of cues calibrated to what a bomb aimer, 6,000 feet up, moving at over 200 kilometers an hour, glancing down for perhaps 10 or 15 seconds, would actually perceive. Rows of dim lights, roughly the spacing of workshop skylights leaking around blackout blinds, sat on timber gantries a few meters off the ground. Some sites used real fire baskets, fed with wood, oil, or coke, arranged and lit in sequence by a small crew working from a control bunker, so that a raid would appear to progress exactly as a genuine attack would. Early fires lit first, further fires added as if spreading, all timed to the rhythm of the actual air raid warning system. The equipment was startlingly low-tech by the standards of the weapons it was meant to defeat. A single decoy fire basket might weigh as little as 15 kilograms, little more than a large dustbin, yet a cluster of them, correctly spaced and correctly lit, could persuade an experienced bomber crew that they were looking at a burning industrial complex the size of several football pitches. By 1941, there were more than 200 decoy sites scattered across Britain, some protecting factories, others protecting airfields, ports, and even entire townscapes, all run from a modest headquarters that, at its peak, controlled a workforce smaller than a single infantry battalion. The results at Filton were, by the department's own cautious internal reporting, remarkable, though never total. German aircrew returning from raids over Bristol frequently reported successful strikes on the aircraft works, describing fires and explosions consistent with a major industrial target, when in fact they had bombed open farmland above Blackdown Hill. Local accounts and later research suggest the decoy site was attacked on at least a dozen separate occasions between 1940 and 1942, with some wartime assessments putting the figure closer to 17 raids over the course of its operational life, though precise German bombing records for individual sorties are incomplete, and some claimed attacks cannot be verified from Luftwaffe logs alone. What is well documented is the pattern. Repeated raids on empty ground, repeated claims of damage to Filton in German after-action reports, and a real factory that continued producing aircraft with comparatively little interruption through some of the heaviest bombing months of the war. If you're finding this interesting, a quick subscribe helps more than you know, because there is a great deal more of Britain's hidden war still to uncover. The psychological effect on German crews, though harder to measure than a crater in a field, mattered too. Aircrew who believed they had struck a target successfully were less likely to press home a second attack on the real thing the same night, and squadron commanders working from inflated damage assessments sometimes deprioritized a factory they believed was already burning, when in truth it was operating undamaged only a mile and a half away. Germany experimented with similar deception, building dummy airfields and, in a small number of cases, decoy industrial sites of its own to draw Allied bombers away from cities such as Berlin and Hamburg. But the scale and sophistication never matched Britain's program, partly because the Luftwaffe's early wartime successes reduced the perceived urgency of such measures. and partly because Germany lacked an equivalent concentration of film industry talent redirected wholesale into military deception. The United States, entering large-scale strategic deception later in the war, took the concept in a different direction entirely, most famously camouflaging entire aircraft factories on the American West Coast beneath elaborate rooftop suburbs, complete with painted lawns, fake houses, and canvas trees designed to defeat daylight reconnaissance rather than night bombing. It was an impressive achievement in its own right, but it addressed a different threat, since the continental United States faced no realistic prospect of sustained night raids the way Britain did. Britain's QF sites, by contrast, were engineered specifically around the psychology of a tired, disoriented bomber crew flying at night, which made them cheaper, faster to build, and in some ways more elegant than their American counterparts, trading architectural spectacle for a handful of fire baskets and a controlled lighting rig. Assessing the precise material impact of the decoy program remains difficult, and historians are careful not to overstate it. Some proportion of the bombs that fell on fields like Blackdown Hill would very likely have missed Filton anyway, given the notoriously poor accuracy of night bombing in this period, and no decoy site could claim sole credit for keeping a factory operational. What can be said with more confidence is that the psychological architecture of the scheme, convincing German aircrew that raids were succeeding when they were not, fed directly into faulty German intelligence assessments of British industrial resilience, contributing to a broader miscalculation about how much bombing Britain's factories could absorb. The program's techniques also fed forward into later Allied deception operations, including the far larger fake army camps and dummy landing craft built ahead of the Normandy invasion in 1944, a lineage running in an unbroken line from painted fields in Somerset to the phantom armies of Operation Fortitude. Little survives of the physical decoy sites today. Most were dismantled or simply left to rot back into farmland once their usefulness ended, and the fields above Blackdown Hill show no obvious trace of the fires that once burned there on Turner's orders. What survives instead is the paperwork, a scattering of Air Ministry files, wartime photographs of fire baskets under construction, and the occasional recollection from a former set painter turned decoy engineer, describing a job that felt, at the time, almost too strange to take seriously. Return, for a moment, to that night above Blackdown Hill. The wood smoke, the false glow, the bombs falling on grass that would be green again by spring. It is easy, looking back from the distance of 8 decades, to see the comedy in it, a nation famous for its stiff upper lip choosing to fight back not with steel, but with stagecraft, borrowing the tricks of the cinema to save the tools of war. But there is nothing comic in what it achieved. Every bomb that fell on an empty field was a bomb that did not fall on a factory floor, where men and women stood building the aircraft Britain needed to survive. Every German crew that returned to base believing they had struck Filton was a crew that would not return the following night to try again. The war was won, in no small part, by radar stations and fighter pilots and the sheer industrial output of factories like the one at Filton, but it was also won, in a smaller and stranger way, by a handful of set designers who understood that a bomber crew 6,000 feet up, tired, frightened, and moving at speed, does not need the truth. It only needs something that looks true enough, for just long enough to pull the trigger. 17 times, or a dozen, or however many raids the records finally settle on, the Luftwaffe returned to bomb the same painted field, and 17 times, give or take, they left Filton standing. In a war fought with steel and fire, sometimes the most effective weapon Britain built was a lie.